Okay, let's stick with this story because we know that the discovery that was made in Kamloops has brought back painful memories for residential school survivors and for their families. To get a better sense of the impact, let's bring in Angela White, the Executive Director of the Indian Residential School Survivors Society. It's been providing services to residential school survivors for over 20 years, and she's joining us from Vancouver. Angela, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Angela, it's been a long week. A lot of us have been thinking about what was discovered in Kamloops, the children, those stories, and what has happened across this country. And I wonder for you and your organization, what have you all been experiencing over the past week?
Quite honestly, it's just an influx of calls and virtual interactions with clients looking for support, looking for a shoulder to lean on. Some places for survivors that they feel safe in sharing their experiences and stories and memories. And we got to remember that this discovery, as Chief Casimir said, is unprecedented and there is no roadmap, but it's also looking at how these survivors, when they were children, making those connections as to what they actually experienced, what they witnessed, and, coming to that realization that their voice was not silenced, that this is the time where people are going to take notice and believe what happened to them.
When people call you, do they share their experiences at the school? Are they still traumatized by it? I'm trying to be so careful with the language because this is so raw for so many of us that aren't even directly connected to it. What do people ask of you, and how are you able to help?
Yes, they do share their stories because you have to remember again that their entire lives, they've been suppressing those memories. Their entire lives, they've been told that no one would ever believe them, that what they were seeing, they may be crazy because who would do that? And so when they do share their stories, all we can do is listen, validate their feelings, provide that immediate crisis counseling to ground them so that they can get to a place where they can resume their daily life. That when they are looking for prolonged support, it's making those connections and bringing them to the right people so that they can start dealing with that deep-rooted trauma.
Angela, something that has become clear over the course of this week is that people understand if one is a survivor of one of those residential schools, why that this would be very painful, very traumatic. But it isn't exactly clear to a lot of people why family members or descendants of survivors are feeling so traumatized. Can you help us understand what is this thing that we talk about, generational trauma and generational pain that's passed down?
Well, these children, when they were forcibly removed from their homes, their families, their communities, they were anywhere from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years of age. And they were placed in these institutions at such a young age that during those formative years of when you're learning to make those connections and bonds with your family, and that's where you're taught a lot of your life skills of empathy and touch and love and right from wrong, and these children never received that. The only validation or acknowledgement they received was very horrific abuses, whether it was physical, emotional, or sexual. And then these children get out and they have all these different paths to choose from, where they're going. Some go directly into a life of, in and out of the prison system. Some hit the streets because they no longer can feel comfortable within the four corners of their homes. Perhaps people leave their communities because there's things in there that they just don't feel comfortable or safe in. Then they become parents. And you have to ask that question: what kind of parenting skills did they learn in those schools? And how did they actually bring up those children? I'm an intergenerational survivor, and you look at the trauma that you go through. And if you don't deal with those traumas, then you kind of look at it as you just deal with it for the rest of your life. You need to take those steps to heal. And so intergenerational survivors are in a lot of pain because they too a lot of us have not heard the stories of our parents or grandparents because they refuse to share it. And so with this uncovering, it's also making things aware with us, what they went through, that they did the best they could with the knowledge they had, that they are probably the strongest people we know because they were able to, just to get through life and be the people that they are and provide us with our future. And it may not have been a bright one at one point, but we make it what it is. And if we choose to be powerful, strong, and a voice, that's where it's going to lead to.
You mentioned there that you are yourself experiencing this from an intergenerational perspective, and I understand that you do have a connection to this story. You've shared a little bit of that. As much as you're feeling comfortable, can you tell me what your family has experienced?
I think just briefly, I think a lot of people do experience this. It's as a child, you grow up really fast because your life is intertwined in that trauma of violence, of alcohol, of just, and then you just learn to be quiet about it. And then you become the protector. As the eldest of all my cousins, you become a protector. And that's exactly what happened. And you end up going through your next stage of life in marriage and trying to build relationships when you've never known what a true relationship really is until you do the healing. With my ex-marriage, I always say, he was the fire, I was the fuel, and we did the best we could for our 3 children. And they are now adults, but I think in my 30s, I went to them and sat with each of my children, and I apologized and told them that I did the best I could with what I understood as what a parent should be, and that I would do better at it later on. And that's been my motto in life is, if I do a mistake, I will ensure every ounce of me will do better because I will learn from that mistake. And we're only human, and we still fall back into some of these angry, violent traits, and it's a lifetime. It's a lifetime of healing. You will never get over it. It's just about learning from those triggers that you recognize them immediately.
There's so much more I want to ask you, Angela, but you mentioned that you actually apologized to your children, saying that you did the best that you could do. What did your children say back to you? How did they react?
My children are amazing. They, and I will say that when you look at 3 of my children, you can see where each of them are in life and their behaviors and their personalities based on where I was or their father. And so, my oldest at one point says, "Mom, I'll always love you, but there's times when I never liked you." That's hard to hear.
There's so much more that needs to be explored. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I feel it. And I know obviously you're feeling it too. Let me not let you go without asking you. It's okay. It's okay. I'm right there with you. So let's try and get through this last one together, which is, you're in this position of personally experiencing it. You're also in this position of talking to so many people who are calling you, asking for help. What do you think needs to happen next, Angela? Does the federal government need to investigate? Does the International Criminal Court need to get involved? Does the Pope need to apologize? What can we do to get to a better place?
Jeez, that's such a big question to unwrap, isn't it? I think as a community, as a country, there's so many new people that are trying to uncover and, wrap their heads around 215 children being discovered in a school where only 52 were documented as deaths in that school. Mm-hmm. And so as a community, I think all we can do is ask people to not be silent anymore. Be good listeners, be good learners, be good stopping the systemic racism that we witness, and be empathetic with our history and understanding what's going on. Yes, the church needs to apologize. It's only the right thing to do. Whatever those words are, they may not meet the need, but it is something that needs to be done because it's the right thing to do. The federal government needs to start putting action behind their words, looking at all of those inquiries of like the TRC recommendations, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls inquiry, the report that Mary Ellen Tappel had done here and saying that regarding the Indigenous treatment in healthcare, looking at the systemic things that are happening in that relationship with the RCMP and justice system. At the bare minimum, ensuring that there is clean water, which is a basic human right to all Indigenous people throughout this country. Ensuring that that culturally appropriate and safe spaces are available for any Indigenous person that is looking for healing, because I think I'm going to end that on saying that one of the best things that possibly federal and the church systems can do is start providing something that will restore the language, culture, and traditions that these institutions deliberately took away.
Okay. Angela, can't thank you enough for your time, for sharing so much of not only your insights, but your personal story and your own experience. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I didn't expect it to hit me so hard.
It's okay.
But thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Angela White is the Executive Director of the Indian Residential School Survivor Society. She's joining us from Vancouver, and you're watching CBC News Network.